Look, let me tell you something that happened a few days ago in my office here in Chicago. Mr. Richard, a 72-year-old gentleman, arrived extremely worried. He told me he'd been unable to sleep well for months, that he felt irritable, that even his memory was failing. And when I asked about his intimate life, he lowered his gaze and confessed something I hear almost every day. Since my wife passed away 3 years ago, I just stopped all that. At my age, what's the point, right? And there's the problem, gentlemen, that what's the point is one of the biggest mistakes older men make. Because what I'm going to tell you today may sound uncomfortable, may even sound embarrassing to some. But believe me, after more than 30 years as a urologist, I've seen the consequences of ignoring this topic. And no, I'm not talking about something dirty or sinful. I'm talking about health, about prevention, about taking care of your body the way it should be cared for. I'm Dr. Evelyn Carter, a urologist with over 3 decades treating men of all ages. And today we're going to talk about something nobody tells you, but everyone needs to know: what happens to your body when you stop masturbating after 60. Yes, that's exactly what you heard. And before you close this video or think, oh, this doctor, what is she saying? Give me 5 minutes. What you're about to hear can change your quality of life, your mental health, and even prevent serious problems you can't even imagine. Look, in America, we're very reserved about these topics, right? We were taught that talking about sexuality is in poor taste, that it's sinful, that at a certain age you shouldn't anymore. But I'm going to speak to you with all the frankness you deserve, doctor to patient, person to person. Because medical science has demonstrated something very clear. Sexual activity, including masturbation, is not a luxury or a whim. It's a health function. And when older men abandon it completely, the body starts to collect its toll. Let me go back to Mr. Richard's story. When I talked more deeply with him, I realized his problems weren't coincidence. He told me that before his wife passed away, they had an active sex life, moderate but constant. Doctor, we loved each other very much, he said with watery eyes. But after losing her, he decided there was no point, that it was for young people, that he'd already lived his life. And little by little, the symptoms started. First insomnia, then irritability, then he started forgetting simple things like where he left his keys or why he entered a room. His daughter thought it was Alzheimer's, and that's why she brought him to me. And you know what I discovered in his tests? His testosterone levels were rock bottom, his blood pressure was elevated, and he had clear symptoms of mild depression. All of this, gentlemen, has a direct connection to the total abandonment of sexual activity. I'm not saying it's the only cause, but it is an extremely important factor that nobody mentions to you. Now, what exactly happens in your body when you stop having sexual activity for months or years? Well, look, I'm going to explain it simply, without so much medical jargon. Your brain, gentlemen, is like a chemical factory. When you have sexual activity, whether with a partner or alone, your brain releases a cascade of substances that are essential for your well-being. I'm talking about dopamine that gives you motivation and mental clarity, about endorphins, which are your natural painkillers, about oxytocin that helps you relax and sleep better, and of course testosterone, which in men not only controls sexual desire, but also your energy, your muscle mass, your mood, and even your memory. When you completely abandon sexual activity, these chemicals reduce drastically. It's like slowly turning off the lights in your house. At first, you don't notice it so much, but over the months, everything gets darker. Dopamine drops, and you have trouble motivating yourself even for things you used to enjoy. Endorphins reduce, and you start feeling more pains, more discomforts you didn't have before. Oxytocin disappears, and your sleep becomes a disaster. You toss and turn in bed all night. And testosterone, well, that's the key to many things. Look, there's a very interesting study done at the University of California with men over 65. They found that those who maintained some form of regular sexual activity, even if just once or twice a week, had testosterone levels up to 30% higher than those who had stopped having any type of stimulation. And it's not that masturbation is the source of testosterone, okay? It's that keeping that system active helps your body continue producing hormones adequately. It's like when you exercise. You don't create muscle from nothing, but exercise tells your body, hey, keep producing muscle because I'm using it. But here comes something many don't know, and that's very important. The lack of sexual activity in older men doesn't just affect the physical, it affects your mental health tremendously. Mr. Richard, for example, confessed to me that he felt lonely, empty, as if he'd lost a part of himself. And it wasn't just from missing his wife, it was from having completely disconnected from his own sexuality, from his own body. In the office, I see this almost every day. Men who arrive with depression, with anxiety, with sleep problems. And when I ask them about their sex life, many tell me, "Oh, doctor, what's the point?" And there's the detail. It's not just about pleasure. It's that your body needs that stimulation to stay healthy. It's like exercise after a certain age. If you stop moving, your body atrophies. The same happens with your sexual system. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but Dr. Carter, what about religion? Isn't it a sin? Look, I deeply respect all beliefs. I'm Catholic. I grew up in a traditional American family. I know those teachings perfectly. But let me tell you something from my professional and personal experience. God gave us this body to care for it, to keep it healthy. Masturbation, when practiced in a moderate and healthy way, is not an act of unbridled lust. It's an act of self-care. It's like eating, like sleeping, like exercising. It's part of maintaining your health. I've talked with several priests about this topic, believe me, and the most prepared ones, those who study bioethics, will tell you that the church distinguishes between obsession and healthcare. One thing is to live obsessed with sex, and quite another is to attend to your body's basic needs to stay healthy. If you have doubts about this, I invite you to talk with your spiritual director, with someone prepared in these topics. But don't let guilt prevent you from taking care of your health. Besides, think about it this way. When you have diabetes, you take insulin, right? Is that a sin? No, it's taking care of your health. When you have high blood pressure, you take your medication. Of course you do. Well, this is exactly the same thing. It's attending to a need of your body to prevent bigger problems. I'm going to tell you another case that marked me deeply. Mr. Albert, a 68-year-old gentleman from Boston, a retired teacher, came to my office because his family was extremely worried. He'd started having episodes of aggression, something that had never been part of his character. He was a calm, educated man, but suddenly he'd explode over anything. His wife told me they no longer slept in the same room because he'd wake up constantly irritated, unable to rest. When I spoke alone with Mr. Albert, he confessed he'd been without any type of sexual activity for over 5 years. His wife had lost interest after menopause, and he, out of respect and shame, never sought alternatives, not even alone. I was embarrassed, doctor, he told me. I thought it was a kid's thing, not for a man my age. I did complete tests, and indeed his hormonal levels were unbalanced. But he also had clear symptoms of accumulated sexual frustration that was manifesting as irritability and aggression. I explained all this very tactfully, and you know what? At first he resisted. But when I showed him the studies, when I explained the science behind all this, he understood. I gave him clear recommendations, explained there was nothing wrong with attending to his needs, and little by little, he started to improve. 3 months later, he came back to my office and gave me a hug. Dr. Carter, I sleep better. I don't explode over silly things anymore. Even my wife says I seem like a different person. And all because he understood that taking care of his sexual health was part of taking care of his overall health. Now let me give you practical information, because I know many of you are thinking, okay, doctor, I get it, but then what do I do? How do I do it? Look, first of all, the ideal is to do it regularly, but without obsessing. We're not talking about every day or anything like that. 2 or 3 times a week is enough to keep your system active. For some men, once a week is sufficient. What's important is consistency, not quantity. Find a time when you have privacy, where you feel relaxed. It can be in the morning after waking up, when your testosterone levels are naturally higher, or at night before sleeping, when it can help you sleep better. Don't do it in a rush. Don't do it under pressure. Remember, the main objective isn't just orgasm, it's keeping your whole system active, improving your circulation, releasing those hormones your body needs. And here comes something important that almost nobody tells you. After 60, it's normal for things to change. Maybe you need more time, maybe the sensitivity is different. Don't compare yourself to when you were 20 or 30. Your body is different now, and that's perfectly fine. What's important is that you stay connected to your body, that you continue attending to those needs. If you have any medical condition like heart problems, diabetes, or take certain medications, it's a good idea to discuss it with your doctor. In most cases, there's no problem, but it's better to be sure. And if you have a partner, look, the ideal is to also talk with her. Often older women also have their own needs that aren't being met. You can find ways to support each other, even if not always in the traditional way. Another very important point is hygiene. It seems obvious, but believe me, in the office I see many problems that could have been avoided with basic care. Wash your hands well before and after. Maintain good intimate hygiene. If you use any lubricant, make sure it's water-based and without strong fragrances that can irritate. And please, if you notice any pain, burning, bleeding, or anything that doesn't feel normal, come to the office immediately. Don't endure it out of embarrassment. Now let's talk about the specific benefits you're going to notice. First, your sleep is going to improve notably. The oxytocin and endorphins released during orgasm are better than any sleeping pill. Many of my patients report that after resuming their sexual activity, they sleep like they haven't in years. Second, your mood is going to change. The irritability, that feeling of always being in a bad mood, is going to decrease. You're going to feel more relaxed, more at peace with yourself. Mr. Richard told me his daughter said, "Dad, I don't know what the doctor did to you, but you're in a much better mood. And it's that when your body has what it needs, everything works better." Third, your memory and concentration can improve. Remember I told you about dopamine? Well, that hormone is fundamental for cognitive function. Maintaining adequate levels helps your brain work better, your memory stays sharper. Fourth, your immune system strengthens. There are studies demonstrating that people who maintain regular sexual activity have higher levels of immunoglobulin A, which is an antibody that protects you from infections. In times where any little flu can knock us down for several days, this is very important. And fifth, your cardiovascular health improves. Sexual activity is cardiovascular exercise. It's not the same as running a marathon, obviously, but it's sufficient to keep your heart active, improve your circulation, and reduce the risk of cardiovascular problems. Look, it's also important to talk about what's not normal. If when trying to masturbate you feel intense pain, if you can't achieve any type of erection after several attempts, if there's blood or some strange discharge, that requires medical attention. It's not something you should ignore. It can be a sign of some problem that needs treatment, from an infection to prostate problems that need to be checked. And speaking of prostate, this is another important topic. Many men ask me if masturbation affects the prostate. The answer is that actually it can be beneficial. Some studies suggest that regular ejaculation can help clean the prostate of toxins and reduce the risk of certain infections. I'm not saying it's a magic cure for prostate cancer or anything like that, but it does seem to have a moderate protective effect. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I'm not saying masturbation is mandatory or that you should feel bad if you decide not to do it. Everyone makes their own decisions about their body. What I am saying is that if you abandoned it because of unfounded fears, because of shame, or because you thought it's no longer for your age, you're doing yourself unnecessary harm. I've had patients who tell me, "Oh, doctor, but I just don't have the desire anymore." And look, that can be normal to a certain point. With age, sexual desire can diminish, but if it disappears completely, that can be a sign of other problems: low testosterone levels, depression, medication side effects, thyroid problems. It's worth investigating. I've also had patients who tell me, I'm just lazy or I don't have time. And I tell them, gentlemen, this is time invested in your health. It's 15-20 minutes that can make an enormous difference in your quality of life. It's less time than you spend watching the news or checking Facebook. It's a question of priorities. And for those who have a partner and tell me, my wife would be upset if she found out, my recommendation is always the same: talk. Communication is fundamental in any relationship, especially at this stage of life. Often women also have needs they're not expressing. You can find ways to support each other, to understand each other better. And if there's no agreement, it's also valid for each person to attend to their needs privately, without that meaning a betrayal or anything like that. I've seen marriages of many years improve their relationship when both understand that sexuality doesn't end at 60, 70, or 80. It simply changes, adapts, but continues being an important part of each person's well-being. I want to share one last case before finishing. Mr. Frank, a 75-year-old gentleman from Houston, widowed for 7 years, came to my office because his son, who's a doctor, insisted he come. He had mild incontinence problems, was waking up 5 or 6 times every night to go to the bathroom, and this was destroying his sleep and quality of life. After doing all the tests, we discovered that part of his problem was that his pelvic floor muscles were very weakened, and one of the ways to strengthen those muscles is precisely to maintain regular sexual activity. I gave him a complete plan that included specific exercises, but I also recommended resuming his sex life, even if alone. At first, he resisted tremendously. He told me he felt disloyal to his wife's memory, and that broke my heart because, look, the love you have for someone doesn't disappear or get betrayed by taking care of your health. I told him, Mr. Frank, your wife loved you, right? Do you think she'd want to see you suffer unnecessarily, or that you'd take care of yourself and live as well as possible? That made him reflect. 6 months later, he came back to my office, walking more upright, looking better. He told me he'd followed all my recommendations, including resuming his sex life. Dr. Carter, I don't wake up as much at night. I sleep better and I even feel younger, he said with a smile. And the most beautiful thing is he told me he'd started going out with a lady from his church group, and they were getting to know each other slowly, respectfully, but also with an open mind that life doesn't end. Look, gentlemen, what I want you to take from this talk is the following. Getting older doesn't mean giving up your sexuality, doesn't mean you should feel guilty for having needs. Your body is still alive, still functioning, and deserves to be cared for in all its aspects. Masturbation, practiced in a healthy and moderate way, is a health tool. It's not a sin, it's not shameful, it's not a kid's thing. It's self-care. If you've been months or years without any type of sexual activity, I invite you to reflect on this. Ask yourself if you've abandoned that part of you for real reasons or for unfounded fears. And if you decide to resume your sex life, do it without guilt, with the certainty that you're doing something good for your physical and mental health. If you have specific doubts about your particular case, if you have medical conditions that worry you, or if you simply want to talk more about this topic, don't hesitate to seek professional help. A good urologist or a doctor specialized in sexual health can give you personalized guidance. And please, share this information with your friends, with other men your age who maybe also need to hear this but don't dare to ask. The more we talk about these topics naturally and with scientific basis, the more men we're going to help live better, healthier, fuller lives. Remember, taking care of your sexual health is taking care of your overall health. Don't neglect it out of shame or mistaken ideas. Your body will thank you, your mind will thank you, and your quality of life is going to improve notably. If this video was useful to you, if you learned something new, leave me a comment down below. I'd love to know your opinion, your questions, your experiences. And if you know someone who could benefit from this information, share this video with them. Often the correct information can change lives. See you in the next video where we're going to continue talking about important topics for your health. Take good care of yourself, gentlemen, and remember, getting older isn't about stopping living. It's about learning to live with more wisdom, more dignity, and more self-love.